All right, let's do this. Today, we're tackling an absolute literary giant, Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. You know the one, a book so huge its very name has become shorthand for any massive project.
And yeah, for good reason. Just look at that number. It's famously long, clocking in at over 1,200 pages. But we're going to try and break down that entire sprawling story right here in just 5 minutes. Yep, you heard me right.
So how do we even begin to unpack this thing? Well, it all comes down to one single, pretty radical idea from Tolstoy himself. He's basically saying, forget the powerful leaders. Great events aren't caused by them. They're caused by the countless little actions of ordinary people. So this isn't a story about Napoleon or the Tsar. No, it's about everyone else.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll set the scene with Russia on the brink of war. Then we'll dive into some love and heartbreak. After that, the huge invasion of 1812. We'll see how our characters find some wisdom in the ruins. And finally, we'll get to the big one, what Tolstoy thought the meaning of it all was. All right, let's jump in. Picture this. It's 1805. You're at a super lavish party in St. Petersburg, and everyone is gossiping about one guy, Napoleon Bonaparte. And it's right here that we meet the people whose lives we're going to follow. First up, we've got Pierre Bezukhov. He's kind of awkward, super thoughtful, big-hearted, but he just doesn't quite fit in. Then, bam, his super wealthy father dies, and suddenly he's one of the richest guys in all of Russia. You can imagine that really throws his whole search for meaning into complete overdrive. Then there's his buddy, Prince Andrei Bolkonsky. This guy is the total opposite. He's sharp, a little cynical, and just completely, utterly bored with his fancy life. So for him, this coming war with Napoleon, it isn't a threat. No way. It's an escape. It's his shot at finding some real purpose out on the battlefield. And rounding out our main trio is Natasha Rostova. Oh, Natasha. She is just the vibrant, beating heart of this whole story. A young countess who's so full of life and raw emotion. Really? She's like the embodiment of family, love, and just that wild joy of being alive. So, Andrei goes off looking for glory, right? Well, he gets a serious reality check at the Battle of Austerlitz. He gets badly wounded, and as he's lying there on the battlefield, just staring up at this huge, empty sky, it hits him, this huge epiphany. All his dreams of being a hero? Totally meaningless. It's a moment that just shatters him. Okay, so after that first taste of war, the fighting stops for a bit, and the battlefield? It moves from the muddy fields of Europe to the fancy ballrooms of Moscow. With Napoleon out of the picture for now, it's all about the characters' personal battles. And this is where things get really juicy. Our cynical Andrei and the super vibrant Natasha, they fall head over heels in love. It seems perfect, right? Two searching souls finding each other. But Andrei's dad forces them to wait a whole year to get married. Natasha feels abandoned, and she gets tempted by this total scoundrel, Anatole Kuragin. She makes a huge mistake, almost runs off with him, and it completely destroys the engagement. They're both just left devastated. And while all that romantic drama is happening, our guy Pierre is on his own journey. He's stuck in a terrible marriage, so he joins the Freemasons, thinking, okay, maybe I'll find some real spiritual answers here. But nope, he realizes they're all just in it for the networking and secret handshakes, not real truth. So just like Andrei and Natasha, he ends up totally disillusioned.
And then, just when you think it's all about personal drama, history comes roaring back. It's 1812. Napoleon invades Russia, and he's not messing around. He's got the biggest European army ever seen. All those personal lives we've been following, they're about to get swept up in a massive wave of chaos and fire.
And the scale of this thing is just immense. The Russians play it smart, retreating and just pulling Napoleon deeper and deeper into the massive country. Then comes the Battle of Borodino, an absolute horrific bloodbath. So when Napoleon finally gets to Moscow, the big prize, he's expecting them to surrender. But what does he find? A ghost town on fire.
This massive historical event brings our characters to their absolute lowest. Back at Borodino, Prince Andrei is mortally wounded. And Pierre, he actually stuck around in Moscow, wanted to see history unfold, and he gets arrested by the French. They think he's a spy, and he's basically staring death in the face.
So yeah, this is pretty much the darkest moment in the whole book. But for Tolstoy, this is the whole point. It's only out of this complete and total destruction that real understanding can even begin. from the ashes of war, something new starts to grow.
So Pierre is a prisoner of war, and he meets this peasant soldier, Platon Karatayev. And this guy, Platon, he's not a philosopher. He doesn't have big ideas about life. He just lives it with this simple, powerful faith and acceptance. And through him, Pierre finally gets it. The peace he's been looking for his whole life wasn't in books or secret societies. It was right there in simple human goodness.
Natasha has her own major transformation too. As her family is fleeing Moscow, they're carrying wounded soldiers in their carts. And who do they find? It's Andrei. She ends up nursing him as he's dying, and in those final days, they completely forgive each other. It's through that incredible grief that the impulsive girl we met is gone, and in her place is a woman with this incredible new depth.
So, the war finally ends. Napoleon is defeated. The survivors start heading home to rebuild. And it's right here, in this quiet moment after the storm, that Tolstoy finally shows us his hand and reveals his grand vision.
And what happens to our survivors? They find a new kind of peace, a real one. The now wise Pierre and the now matured Natasha, they find each other. They get married and build a life that's not about big, fancy ideas, but about something much more real, the simple, day-to-day rhythm of family and love.
Which brings us all the way back to that huge question Tolstoy's been asking this whole time. So, who does write history? If it's not the great men, like Napoleon, then who is actually calling the shots?
Well, here's Tolstoy's big answer. He completely throws out that whole great man theory. He argues that guys like Napoleon, they don't actually decide anything. They're just pushed along by millions of tiny individual choices and accidents. For Tolstoy, history is like this massive, uncontrollable ocean tide, and the so-called great men, they're just the guys riding the very top of the wave, thinking they're in control.
Okay, so if history is just this giant force we can't control, then what's the point of anyone's life? What's the meaning? For Tolstoy, the answer is actually pretty simple. It's not about some grand plan to change the world. It's about love, connection, family. It's about just taking part in the beautiful, messy flow of life itself.
But Tolstoy, he doesn't just tie it all up in a neat bow. He leaves us with this one last fascinating little twist. Even after finding his inner peace, Pierre gets involved in a secret political group trying to change Russia. Which leaves us with a huge question, right? Even when we find our own personal happiness, does that human itch, that desire to change the world and find an even bigger purpose, does that ever really go away? It's a question that makes this book feel just as urgent today as it was 150 years ago.